Welcome back. This is the final lesson of this module, which looks at punctuation. So in band 7 it states that you need to have good control of grammar and punctuation but make few errors. So you're allowed to make few errors, but if it's repetitive, meaning you make it again and again and again, then in that case this will reduce your band to a 6. At band 8, punctuation isn't even mentioned, and this means that you shouldn't have any errors at all. So if that's what you're aiming for, a band 8, then you need to make sure you nail down your punctuation completely. So punctuation is made up of 3 core components, and that's full stops and capital letters, commas and apostrophes. So let's have a look at full stops and capital letters. In English, capitals and full stops are very important because they show us where the sentence ends and where it begins. So you need to make sure you put a clear full stop at the end of each sentence and then begin the next one with a capital letter. If you make frequent errors in your punctuation, then this will reduce your band to a 6 and even a 5. Capital letters are also used in other places and not just at the beginning of the sentence. So here are the key ones that you need to watch out for. 1, it's used with proper nouns, so names of places, of countries, people, companies. The first letter has to be capital. And in task 1, you will get charts where you have certain countries that are mentioned or certain companies, so you need to make sure you capitalize them if you're using it in your report. The second one is for languages and nationalities. Third, for months and days of the week. I've actually had students in the past who don't capitalize days of the week. You have to do it because they're considered in some way a proper noun. And also all the planets except for Earth, Moon and Sun are capitalized, but you do not capitalize again Earth, Moon and Sun. It's also used for titles, so everything in the title is capitalized except for prepositions. As you can see, the definite article is capitalized, the first letter of conservation and animals, but prepositions are not capitalized in titles. And lastly, for acronyms and abbreviations. So the BBC is short for British Broadcasting Corporation. When you abbreviate something, you have to use all of them in capital letters. Let's go on to commas now. Now, commas are tricky, and because of that, they are the most misused and overused punctuation. But there are certain situations that we use commas in, and if you remember these, you'll be fine. So the first one is when you start a sentence with linkers. So remember we talked about linkers, they connect the previous sentence to the following sentence. So when you use these linkers, you really have to use a comma afterwards, as you can see from these examples. The second one is in lists. Third, with non-defining relative clauses. As I've said before, because it's given extra information, you need to make sure you have your comma before and at the end of the relative clause. They're also used with complex sentences where the dependent clause comes first. So in this example, despite is the dependent clause and it's separated using a comma. So you need to do that. If you have the dependent clause first, then you need to separate the two clauses with a comma. And lastly, it's used before coordinating conjunctions but and so. For example, I'm a vegetarian, comma, so I don't eat meat. Let's move on to apostrophe now. Apostrophes are used in 2 ways. 1, to show possession, to show belonging. For example, this chart shows Kondak's 3 main products. It's also used to show contraction. So for example, it is becomes its. Now the position of the apostrophe can change depending on whether the noun is singular or plural. So if it's singular, like this example, this is my friend's house, then it comes before the S. However, if it's plural, like these are my friends' houses, then it comes after the S. So make sure you remember that. If it's singular, before the S. If it's plural, after the S. Now, contractions in IELTS are actually not allowed, and this is because task 1 and task 2 are considered formal and academic, and because of that style of writing, you can't use contractions. You also can't use informal language like slang or everyday words. So make sure you do not use contractions in task 1 and task 2 at all. So now it's time to practice. Here you have a gigantic paragraph with no full stops, capitals, commas, or apostrophes. So if you go to page 39, I want you to put the capitals and the full stops, commas, and apostrophes where they should be. And I also want you to separate this into 4 paragraphs. So let's go through the answers. So here is the corrected paragraph. I've split it into 4 paragraphs: the introduction, overview, paragraph 3, and paragraph 4. And the yellow, it basically represents the capitals and the full stops. The green represent the commas, and the blue is the apostrophe. So if you want to look at this in a bit more detail, then pause here and do that. So that's the end of this lesson and of this module. And what I really want you to bear in mind from this lesson is that punctuation is extremely important. It's almost as important as grammar. And you cannot really have one or the other. You need both of them to get a band 7 and above. It's time to now review everything that we've set out at the beginning of the module. So all the objectives that we've set out. So can you confidently use the right tense for different time periods? Can you now join and link changes together so you write more smoothly? Are you able to use the present passive and complex linkers in your process questions? Can you use the present perfect passive and the future simple passive for maps? Are you able to use different prepositions correctly for to describe different charts and graphs? Can you use different comparative structures and modify them to show a big or a small difference? Are you able to rank information using a mix of superlative and ranking language? Can you use different subordinating conjunctions to create complex sentences? Are you able to comment on data using relative clauses? And lastly, can you use punctuation accurately? So if you can do all these, very well done to you. You deserve a nice break and a treat. And if you have any questions about anything that I've taught you in this module, then please do get in touch with us on Instagram at excel_IELTS or on our Facebook channel, and I'll happily answer them. So from the next module onwards, we will be just practicing. So we've covered all the basics that you need, and now we are moving on to the practice phase of this course.